Herbi feugleina, herbi freuleina, herbi moleina, herbi meileina, elfis herva,
Could you introduce yourself first?
Hello, Oscar. Good to see you. Yeah, so, well, my name is Jonathan Barendsma. I'm the artist behind Gealdýr, and I'm really excited to do this interview with you.
Can you tell about how you started to make music? How it all started, which year, and how did you arrive to where are you today now?
Yeah, so that's it's quite a long story. I think it was the year 2018 when I started with Gealdýr. I've had quite a long journey with my health problems. Yeah, I was super inspired to create music on the journey that I had with my health situation, and to explain that in a better way. It's like, yeah, as some of my listeners may know by now, is that I suffer from quite some severe health problems. I have severe genetic heart disease. And besides that, I also suffer from myalgic encephalitis, what is damaging basically my nerve and brains. I have this for over at least 12 years. And by the time it started, I basically, this was all before I started with Gealdýr, of course. And at the time that my health issues started to be severe, I was only able to lay on bed, and I was very house ridden, bedridden at that time. At that time, I really like discovered, for example, bands like Heilung or Vadruna. I really got in touch with this music genre that is so, yeah, a spiritual, awoken something in myself that I didn't know exist, something of my ancestors. I mean, I've always been a huge history nerd, and I love history, and everything that comes with that. When going through all the health struggles that I went through, and basically only being able to lay on bed, and my whole life basically collapsed, that's where I really found like this healing power that music can have on my body and soul. I remember that at that time, how intensely music just helped me. I remember that I always said to myself that when there comes a moment when I feel a bit better, or at least when I'm able, I would love to create this kind of music myself, or dive into like this Norse mythologies or Celtic mythologies, and dive into that and create beautiful healing songs focused on the ancient mythologies, basically. Because yeah, I really found like an amazing healing power in that, and using all these ancient instruments. Of course, we do not know how the music exactly sounded at that time. We cannot know, but it's also like creating something new, what once has been there before.
Did you trained how to play those instruments?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, as a teenager, I like played piano, and I did like to sing and stuff like that. I even started a little indie pop kind of music. Yeah, not like a band, but more like I started a little project, but it was more for myself, to develop myself and learn to sing and play piano and guitar, and everything like that. That was all before I became ill, basically. But that was purely hobby, and at that time I went to like college and everything. So it was purely hobby at that time. But when I started to be sick and everything, it was the first 3 years were absolutely hell for me. And but after that time, I was finding ways to deal with my health issues, and I basically found also ways to go a little bit into music again. To be very honest, I never had any singing lessons, or musical lessons where I learned from other people how to play, for example, the lira or the tagoharpa or the flute. For me, it's like how I like to create music. It's like I love to go sit in my studio and grab my keyboard or my microphone or my tagoharpa or lira, and I love to create melodies. That's basically how I love to work. I am very creative in my head. Basically, it's very easy for me to come up with all kind of ideas, and that's honestly how it started. So I never like to play other people's music. I really always like to create kind of like create my own kind of stuff. Um, yeah, every time see it as a almost like as a new puzzle that I start to create and make.
And can you like tell a little bit about your creative process? So you already said you start from just experimenting or playing
Yeah,
around,
yeah.
and how I think you have like those ideas, and how do they evolve? How they give you inspiration? How they got transformed into text and music?
I love to just sit behind my studio and start creating. So, for example, I do not know how to read notes or read chords or stuff like that. It's I do everything on yeah through hearing basically. So also the tuning and everything like that. I have whatsoever no musical experience when it comes to the traditional way of creating music. And I think at the same time, it's also kind of like my strength that that because I don't do things in a traditional way, it gives me a lot of like freedom in my head to experiment and create ideas. So yeah, as you know, Oscar, like I create, of course, at the moment, mostly. I am inspired by the Norse mythologies. Most of my songs till now have been based on that. So I also always like to think in pictures and almost like if I see a movie in front of me and I want to create a certain kind of sound for that. And for me, it's really like I always focus on the feelings because for me, music, at least my own music, is purely about feeling. So what do I feel with it? I know that a lot of people who listen to my music, they love how it sounds, but they do, of course, they do not fully understand Old Norse because it's like a dead language, of course. So I think also for most of my audience or listeners, I think for them the most important part of the music is like how does it feel for them? What kind of feeling does it give them? And yeah, I think that's always how I approach my music in my studio is just creating out of my own emotional state. And that also has to do with a lot of, as you can imagine, when you have like a lot of health problems, life is not always easy. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, if that is mentally or physically or whatever situation they're in. Everybody has their own struggles. But for me, it's like I really pour a lot of my emotion in my music.
You mentioned that you see images when you create music.
Yeah.
Can you give a couple of examples?
Yeah, well, for example, like when I go, for example, through the Norse mythology, through the poetic Edda, through all the stanzas and all the different poems, basically. For me, it's like when I read it, it's well. Let's talk, for example, about the existence or the start of the existence of the universe. In the Norse mythology, it's called like Ginnungagap, you know, the creation of the world or the start of of the world. How that story is told, like I get all kind of images in my head. For example, like how that could have been, how that would start. Same, for example, I did one song together with Dunheim called Ymir. In the first half of the song, I had basically this kind of solo vocal part of myself. I really like to portray kind of like how yeah, it's hard sometimes for me to explain the images that I see, but I love to portray it into emotions, how I feel, how I see it and feel it basically. It's not always easy to just say, oh, I see this or that, but I really see it as a movie coming by sometimes. I just put all my emotion into that to create the what I feel basically.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some people believe that ideas are coming to us from some space where they live or reside.
I believe we are, you know, spiritual beings living a human experience. And I also personally believe that sometimes it feels for me like I am transferring some or I'm going in a certain state of mind almost. You can almost call it like a meditative kind of state of mind. that I see images, but at the same time, I almost transfer a certain kind of energy into my music. And that comes from a certain place. And I honestly think sometimes it is not always coming from myself, but from maybe a higher dimension, or however you want to call it. Maybe that sounds to some people weird, but for me it really feels like a flow of energy that flows at that moment then through me. The best as I can explain it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very interesting. And regardless of where it comes from, like for real, is it just inside our head, or is
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just like a real supernatural kind of thing that goes on? I think the entire art basically is like all the artist world is basically thriving on that energy feeling.
yeah.
It would not be any art or music if it would not be that sensation of connecting and experiencing some like flow of
Yeah,
energy.
it's very intriguing when you look at science, for example. And I think it was like Nikola Tesla who said something like, I'm afraid that I will not quote it 100% correctly, but he said something, if you want to understand the universe, you have to think in frequency and energy, if I said correctly. I really believe that everything around us, when you think, for example, about, let's say, where all religions and forms of spirituality come from, right? Because of course, the music that I create has a huge, let's say, a huge spiritual background, of course, and meaning behind it. I do think that all religions, when you go really, really back in time, all comes back to the animistic kind of form of spirituality that ancient tribes had. And it basically means that they believe that everything around us has a form of energy or soul or spirit, basically, in older terms. But you can also just see it as a form of energy. And I think when you put that next to science, it makes a lot of sense, you know? And I think that nowadays we live in a world where we do know a lot about science now, and we think we found most of the answers of life. But at the same time, I think that these kind of answers have always kind of been there, you know, have always been in ancient tribes, in nature. And I just think that because of everything what happened in the past with different religions, different empires, so on, I think we have lost a lot of, yeah, knowledge, let's say ancient ancestral knowledge, that is still very true, but maybe has been explained in more simpler ways than how we do now.
Can you comment a little bit about your personal spirituality, or if that's animism, like, or
Yes.
and how you are connected maybe to Nordic beliefs?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey for me. I've been raised by wonderful parents, but in a very Christian, almost like evangelical background. That's where my whole youth has been, so to speak. In my later life, I was able to kind of like let that go, because I have always been like very interested, like, what does it mean, and where do we truly come from, and what is truly, on the, let's say, after death, or what is next, I don't know why, but I always had these very intense questions for all my life, and I've always felt that I've been on a huge path of a spiritual journey to trying to figure things out. And actually, when I became like really sick and I couldn't find certain answers that I would be able to find, for example, in Christianity, I was able to kind of let that spirituality or religion go, and kind of like dive really deep into the spiritual path of my ancestors before Christianity became a big part of Europe. Let's say we talk about like Norse mythology or Celtic mythology, and for me, still till this day, besides wanting to create music that heal people, it's like a real spiritual journey to understand better and more, like, okay, what was before, like, modern religions as we know them, how was that? And yeah, basically, for me personally, It's not that I'm like a let's say a follower of Norse mythology, or I believe directly in the gods as they are being portrayed. I like to believe in a way that I think there's a lot of truth. For example, when you talk about the different worlds, for example, in Norse mythology, we live in Midgardr or Midgard, the middle world, and we are basically in the middle part of Yggdrasil, the world tree. And below us we have Helheimer, for example, Helheim, and above us is Asgard. And I like to believe that there is a lot of deep spiritual meaning that you can also find in different kind of mythologies. Like, for example, in Celtic mythology, they talk about when people pass, or the spiritual world, they talk about the other world. It's also something very interesting what I'm actually started to dive in recently more and more, because I'm also working on a new album what's really focused on Celtic mythology and the Druids, and I'm really doing a lot of research what I can. Since now I have worked with Old Norse, reconstructed Old Norse, and we reconstructed Old English. These have both been like dead languages, but I'm also working at the moment on creating music in Old Gaelic or Old Irish, as some call it, which is also a dead language. And I am really trying to figure now out how I can create beautiful music with that dead language as well. Coming back though on your answer of my own spiritual beliefs, I definitely would say I am closest to kind of the animistic way of thinking about life, because I think this is the closest form to ancient kind of spirituality. Animistic way of thinking has been found all over the globe. It's almost like this global consciousness way of thinking of our ancestors, or global ancestors, however you want to call it. What has been very connective and almost like very united way of seeing life and spirituality.
You have quite impressive numbers on Spotify, and for instance, your song Enrique, it reached 56,000 just in 5 days. And those are quite impressive numbers, because I checked Vardruna has just 4 times more listeners per month. So I just wonder, how was it road? Why do you think people found you, and like why such great popularity?
That's a very good question. I often wonder that myself. I would like to think that that one part of it is that my music really can help and connect people maybe with something deeper inside them, or with their own spirituality or their own spiritual way of thinking. For me, my own personal key of creating music has always been the emotion, and I think maybe that's also what helps people, because when I talk to some of my listeners and have some conversations with them, a lot of the times I just hear from them that they struggle with something, and this can be mental or physical sickness, but very often I hear it gives them a lot of relaxation and a place to just calm down and relax after a difficult day, or if they have to go to work or something. And I think that's always how I love to listen music myself. For example, like when I don't feel good or stressed, or when when I was younger and went to college or whatever, I always put music on to calm my mind down. And so I think that's one area why I have the audience or listeners that I have. Sadly, because of my health condition, I cannot go live. I really wish I could. I really wish I could go out there and do live concerts. And I often get questions from people who would love me to go to come to the country and do a live gig or a concert. And I always it's very difficult always, but I always have to say, sadly, I cannot, because of my health conditions, or I at the moment. I also say sometimes, at the moment, I haven't planned anything. But it always has to come back with my health problems. Sadly, that's the reality of my situation. Yeah, besides that, I did collaborations with Danheim, who already had quite a following. We did a song together called Emir, and that one was I think it has close to almost over 8 million streams on Spotify, and close to also maybe close to 8 million views on YouTube, or it was 5 million on YouTube. I'm not 100% sure now, but that has also been like one opportunity for me that has been really nice to work with another artist in this genre, and create something together beautiful that can help and support people. Also, what has helped definitely is that my music has been included in Netflix Valhalla in season two, which also has boosted my music a little bit in the last year, I could say.
And how usually you start collaborating? Like you have Dunham, you have Katiran new album that is coming next year, and you have Ater Galupi with
Yeah.
Enrique. How those collaborations usually born?
Well, as you may have noticed, I'm quite easy to talk with. I love to connect with people, and honestly, that's for me always the first start to be open, and just to reach out to people, or if they reach out to me and we start to have a connection or a conversation, and then you start to have a connection. So basically, that's how it actually started out a bit with. Also, Atergolupi and me, we started just to talk a bit, and they are super talented artists. And Camilla, she plays beautiful tagaharpa, and besides that, she creates her own instruments together with her partner Fabio, and they are very talented artists. And I was just wondering. I honestly do not know anymore if they came with the idea or if I came with the idea. Doesn't really matter too much, but we came at least to the conclusion that we would love to collaborate with one another. And for me, it's always like I really would like to know a person before I start creating on something. So I would love to know the person behind the artist, or behind the band, or however you want to call that. It's very important for me that I have a good connection with them, and that I kind of feel that we can create something beautiful. And with the new song Enrique, I think we both sides put 50 or like everything what we have in it, and then something beautiful comes out of it. And I think that's, at least for me, that's the key of creating something beautiful, that you are, both sincere people who just love what they do, who love to create music, and who want to create something beautiful for their listeners and audience, and also for themselves, of course. Because when I create music, it's also that I really really enjoy to do it. It's really like it's a pure passion. Else I wouldn't be doing what I do.
You have that symbol of Gealdýr, that rune or something.
Hmm.
I understand it has some sort of meaning, and to be honest, I never was really deeply in like understanding how those symbols are created. Is there any particular process that led to creation of this symbol, and what does it mean?
So yeah, this is the Gealdýr bind rune. It's basically like it's a very interesting story, because in the beginning phase of when I was like creating the music, I really wanted to create like this symbol that could really like represent like Gealdýr. And basically together with a friend at the time, her name is Etain. She has a lot of knowledge when it comes to more the spiritual side of the runes and everything like that. She's really deep into that, and with her help we created this beautiful bind rune. And I also think it's that when you work with runes or bind runes, you really need to approach that also, I think, respectfully and carefully, and also do that with people who really have a lot of understanding of the subject. Basically, with the Gealdýr bind rune, we put the runes together first of the word Gealdýr. And because Gjal in Gaelic means white, and Dyr in Old Norse means a deer, so it basically means white deer. That's actually a very interesting story. If I may explain that to you, it's when I was like in the beginning stage of creating, creating my music, I was walking at that time actually with my good friend Leon, who actually now manages my music. But we were walking through the forest, and I was talking with him the ideas that I had, and where I wanted to go to with it, and what I wanted to create, and I said to him, but I just do not know a name. And at that moment, we saw, like, I mean, believe it or not, but we saw like a small white deer walking through the forest, and I was like, okay, that's it.
That's a sign. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sign. Like, and no joke, we even made like a photo. Like, it's a very bad photo, but we still have it. I honestly do not know if it maybe was an albino deer, or like a certain species, but I was like, okay, this is it. Like, I think this is a beautiful symbol. Like, right at that moment, we were talking about it, and we were like, oh my gosh, that's like a white deer, a white deer walking there. It's like it's a sign, so from somewhere, and I think that's how I was like, yeah, that's a beautiful name. Like, I want to name my self as an artist name White Deer in ancient dead language. I first was fully like focused on like Old Norse. How could I like name that in Old Norse? But it's, if you would literally translate it into Old Norse, I think you would say something like Gealdýr, and I thought, nah, that's not too great. I really like the deer part, but I also at that time, and still, really wanted to go like in, Celtic mythologies, Celtic mythology, and I really wanted to connect as well Norse mythology, Celtic mythology, do something more with that. At the time, I was still in the beginning phase, of course, and so that's where I came with the Gaelic word gealdyr, and geal being white and deer being there. You have Gealdýr, white deer, and I think it was a beautiful name, and it has a beautiful story to it.
How people like when they listen to music, what they usually tell you?
I noticed that what is very beautiful, like, we are in this very unique niche music scene almost, and I noticed so much how supportive people are, and they just write beautiful messages on YouTube or on social media platforms like Facebook or Instagram, and I just want to let everybody know I read everything, guys. I love all your comments, and I'm so honored by it. I also hope that people understand that it's just impossible to react on all of them in detail, because when I react to somebody, I love to have a deep conversation, and I think when somebody's basically pouring their hearts out in a message, as an artist, you just can't, or at least when you have so many messages, it's almost impossible to react in detail on that. And I just want to let people know that I read everything, and I like all your messages, and I absolutely appreciate that. And if just to let people know, if they really want to have the personal conversation or anything like that, they can always, reach out on social media, and I will try to answer what I can. I just really hope that people also understand that it's just sometimes very overwhelming as an artist to get. Yeah, I mean, with Enrique now, I think we have almost 300 messages on the music video on YouTube alone in 5 days or something. It's very overwhelming to react on all of them in detail. But I try to like most of them, and I read them, at least I read all of them, just to let everybody know that.
I think that seeing the deer was at least perceived as a really strong spiritual moment.
Yeah.
And did you had any other moments like that you are comfortable to talk about?
I can say that besides this experience, what I had with the deer, for me, walking through nature is one of the, walking through the forest. I live very close to the forest, basically next to it, and for me, it's always like a spiritual journey to just walk through it and feel the forest. Maybe that sounds weird to some people, but a lot of people in society, they are like, constantly busy. They have so many, of course, responsibilities, but when you're able calm down your state of mind and walk through the forest and really kind of perceive what's going on, you can really feel like there is a lot going on. I mean, there's so many forms of life in the forest alone. What is when you learn to calm your own kind of vibration down, and when you learn to perceive what's next to you and what's around you, there is so much life and also like a certain kind of frequency that feels very healing, you know. So if I want to come up with new creative ideas, I sometimes go for a walk in the forest when my health lets me, because I still suffer very heavy, and for me most of the days I'm just housebound. That's just the reality. But when I'm able to go out, I really, really enjoy that so extremely much. Also because I know what it is to not be able to go out. And besides that, when I have the energy and the energy physically, mentally, and the creative energy to create music in my studio, I really found out as well that I have this. What I said earlier in the interview, it almost feels like sometimes some energy is flowing through me, and this is also one of my experiences, that when I create these very intense vocals, or when I do this very intense vocal work, it's like I connect with almost however you want to call it, like call it the universe or call it, for example, I mean, when we talk about images, right? Like as I said before, I like to think in images and everything like that, stories in my head. Sometimes I create a beautiful like vocal line, and I literally imagine that I'm standing in front of the Yggdrasil tree. It sounds maybe really weird, but it's like I sometimes feel this dense and extremely spiritual experience. I do not know always how to even explain it in words. Then it's like this extreme tree that is just not here on earth, you know. It's the biggest one you've ever seen, and it's like there's so much energy then flowing through me to create the music that I want to create. That is something very personal that I do not actually tell almost to anybody. That is a very, very personal experience.
Thank you for sharing. I think it's beautiful. I just remember I was speaking with Einar Selvik. For him, it also involves going to the forest and, I don't know, standing maybe in the river playing some instrument. It's so similar to what you say.
That's very interesting. I really respect him so much, and he has been a huge inspiration for me to also to create the music that I create, of course.
Just maybe the
Yeah.
last question. Like, what are your album plans when you're going to complete the next album?
It's very difficult at the moment to say too much about, because I'm in the very, very early stages of the album. And besides that, I'm working on certain projects that I can sadly not say anything yet about, but that are absolutely like super big projects. But all I can say to the people who are listening to this interview is that I'm working on really, really cool things, and I think people are really, really going to enjoy it and like it. And I can definitely say that at the end of this month, I have a new song coming out. So that's gonna be a surprise, and yeah, I am very excited about that.
Sweet from heaven Fyrt fast kall vil björk